Hello and welcome to another Friday Facebook Live with GrowTraffic. Today we are talking about our communities and how can we help our communities. We are talking about the charitable sector, community organisations, or just people who are getting together, realising that there's a need in the community and getting out there and helping them. So lots of different angles. I don't know if you joined in last week, but last week we were talking to two amazing women who've been either shielding for personal health or helping people who've been shielding. And we talked about how COVID has been hitting the most vulnerable people in our society. And today's session is really going to follow on from that, but looking at it more of from an organisational point of view rather than a personal point of view. So there was a report that came out on the BBC, I think a couple of days ago, and it was saying that 1 in 10 charities, 1 in 10 UK charities is actually on the verge of bankruptcy thanks to the last 3 months. The stresses that they have been put under, both from the point of view of the people that need their services, and then at the other end, they're being squeezed because they're not able to get out there and do fundraising or get their funds in the normal way that they can. And this is putting UK charities under a huge, huge stress. So that's what we want to talk about today. What issues are charities facing, and what can we as normal people do to try and help them? So we've got a fab team of women with me today. So Peta, you might recognise, she's been on a session before. And then we've got Samara and Clare, but I'll go around first and ask them to introduce themselves. So Peta, what's your name and where do you come from?
Hi, my name is Peta. I'm from a company called Vital Force Massage, and we provide stress management really in the workplace. I live in Sheffield, but I can cover anywhere basically. So I haven't had any work at all for the last 4 months. Joy.
No. And Samara, what's your name? Where do you come from?
So as I said, I'm Samara, and I'm over in the Rosendale Valley in a lovely little town called Haslingden, and I run a couple of community projects in the area. Rosendale Red Flag Projects, which focuses on menstrual and hygiene products. The newly formed Haslingden and Helmshire Mutual Aid Group, which is a response to the COVID-19 situation, and also Haslingden Food Box, which was what it says on the tin.
Brilliant, thank you. And as you might notice, the two of us who are here in Rosendale are having some connectivity issues here. Numbers and our sounds are not great, so you'll have to just bear with us. So thank you for that, Samara. And Claire, what's your name and where do you come from?
Hi, I'm Clare Hobley, and I'm Head of Services for Blackburn with Darwin Carers Service. So we're a charity that supports family carers living within the Blackburn with Darwin area.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we've got a good range of people here who have, all of you in your different ways have been helping the community over the past few weeks. So I'm going to go around again and I'm going to ask you this time to tell me about your personal situation. So what have you been, what situation do you find yourself in first of all, but also what have you been doing to help your community throughout this time? So Peta, what about you?
Well, my personal situation, yes, as I said, I've had absolutely no work. It just completely stopped overnight, as you can imagine. And so, yeah, absolutely nothing going on, nothing coming in. So I've been working on online courses and things like that to get it out to people, to get stress management out to people, to help people, come to terms with what's going on in the world, really, because it's thrown us up, hasn't it? That's my sort of business, but on a personal level I actually volunteer 1 day a week at a homeless organisation in Sheffield, which is called the Cathedral Arch Project, and they help to get homeless people back into whatever normal is, to be honest. And we're the only organisation that has kept running throughout in Sheffield. We're the only organisation that's kept open, so we offer breakfast and lunches and food parcels and all that kind of thing, and bits of clothing. There's a few other places open now, so there's more stuff going on, but it's been really an eye-opener, because I've only been doing this for a few months, and it's been a real eye-opener this last few months, seeing how it's affected the homeless community in Sheffield. I'm very new to doing volunteering anyway, because I only started last November, but it's something you see and you keep thinking, right, I want to do something to help. I want to try and help these people. And I've always said to myself, when I've got when I've got more time, when I've got more money, when I've got, it's the usual excuse. And then last year I just thought, oh, sod it, go on, just go and bloody do something. For Christ's sake, put your money where your mouth is. And yeah, these last few months have been really tough, seeing how it's impacted on the homeless, because a lot of them just don't understand, unfortunately. It's a mental health issue very often. Well, most of the time I've realized it's a mental health issue. So it's been a really tough time, actually.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll come back to. But Joanne, who we were speaking to on last week's session, which is available on the GrowTraffic Facebook page if you want to watch it, but she was there. She started volunteering at the beginning of lockdown as well with her local church to provide shopping. She's doing shopping trips for the elderly, vulnerable, and the housebound. And it was exactly the same thing. And I think this is that whilst, this situation, one thing it has brought about is that a lot of people have suddenly become aware that there are a lot of vulnerable people in our societies, and exactly like you said, Peter, whereas before they were saying, I haven't got time, I know I should volunteer, but I don't have the resources or the time or the money or anything. I think a lot of people have gone into it during this period, which is brilliant to see, but it has been eye-opening for so many people. So that's definitely something that we'll come back to. Thank you. So, Samara, your camera's gone off again, but I know it'll come back on in a minute. But tell me about you. What's your personal circumstances and what are you doing at the moment to help the community?
Well, if you can't see me, I could be doing absolutely anything, couldn't I? I'll probably put screen now. So my personal circumstances are that I work for a national children's charity. I held a digital role, which was actually furloughed because a lot of the work that we delivered couldn't be delivered. So I was redeployed back to children's services. I've actually worked in the children's services sector for the past 15 years. So I was sent from digital back to the front line, so to speak. I've been quite lucky that most of the work that I've done has been from home, and managing a service which is 200 odd miles away remotely.
Wow.
And away from that, I have a couple of community projects, a couple that were already established and a couple that I've set up since lockdown in response to the needs of our local community. So I think the one that you will already know of, Rachel, is the Rosendale Red Bag Project. So we deliver and collect monthly and hygiene items for those who need them. But what we did very, very quickly at the beginning of lockdown, we also started what's called Helping and Helmstroke Mutual Aid Group, and that's got nearly 600 members of two small villages in Rosendale that came together to help people who were isolating either, or they were shielding, and we do shopping for each other. We've befriended people over the phone. People have done all sorts of weird and wonderful things for each other over this past 14 weeks. And then more recently as well, I've also started Cousin and Food Box, which is literally a box of food that goes out in Haslandon every single day that people can access. And I've been told that it's been a great success for people that couldn't afford food because they've either been furloughed or they've been self-employed and they've not had the work come in. So yeah, it's a bit garbled, but yeah, that's what I've been doing.
No. You're a very, very busy woman, as we all know. So thank you. Some of those questions that we'll come back to, that increase of people needing to have, food banks and stuff. We'll come back to because there's a misconception that it's poor that need to access food banks, and it really isn't it? So Claire and Esther,
come and join me just at the right time.
That's all right.
We support family carers, as I said. So it's usually people that might have family members with illnesses or disabilities. So you're thinking about people with parents that might be elderly or have dementia, or children with special needs, and anyone really in your family who's maybe got a diagnosis or a disability. And what we found is with this whole situation, it just keeps evolving. So at the beginning, people were very concerned about the rules. Like, I usually take my mum some food and make sure she's had a medication. Am I still allowed to do that? And at the beginning, we were given a lot of reassurance and things like that. And then as the time has gone on and people were getting furloughed and then redundancies started to strike, we've kind of had to respond in a very different way. So as you know, the other guests are saying about the food and how vital that is, and we've had a really good solid team of volunteers that are taking meals out to people. One of the schools, West Home School in Blackburn, said, you know, we've got really good kitchens, we're prepared to make food for the community. You need a team of volunteers to distribute it, and that's happened, and it's been an absolute lifesaver for a lot of people that otherwise would have gone hungry. So that's really good that we've been able to provide that. We've had an amazing team of volunteers and staff as well that are doing befriending phone calls. So a lot of people that are having to isolate and shield. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're living with someone that's immune compromised and they're poorly, you can't go to a supermarket the way, you know, the rest of us, you know, even tentatively can. So our volunteers have done an amazing job keeping that link, and just we keep doing like welfare checks, really, making sure that people are okay, especially some of the old people that we have. And a lot of the younger, we support young adult carers that are aged between 18 to 24. And, you know, for that group, all of a sudden the whole support network's cut off. You know, if some of them had part-time jobs in hospitality industries, that's gone by the wayside. So their income's cut off. Everything's up in the air with the studies. And like with the mental health, we're quite concerned that we need to put special efforts into that cohort.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the things we were talking about last week, is that because Becky, who was on last week, she's 21 or 20, she has cystic fibrosis, so has been shielding, and we were saying that the community is set up, the systems were already there to help people who were elderly. You know, they had a caring system, they had services like yours or Age Concern or whatever going in and doing sitting services. They had that network set up, but actually for the younger people who were used to being independent and going and doing their own thing, they were in a way the ones that had the biggest shock, because all of a sudden that independence is gone and those networks aren't set up there for them. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that the services have been needed right across the board, from young to old, rich to poor. You know, those services have been there. That is actually one of the next things I just want to say. I've figured out that what the background noise is when one of us is talking, if I silence the other mics, it stops the background feed. So I'm going to do that in between us talking. But if you have something to say, put your hand up and I'll unmute you. But I'll do it to myself as well. So if we all start talking and you can't hear us, I apologise. So thinking then about these extra stresses that have been put on the community. Peter, I'm going to come to you again first. From your point of view, what have you seen in terms of the charity work that you've been doing and the organisations that you've been working with? What are the extra stresses that they've been put under? And I'll just unmute you. Bear with. There we go.
Well, the main stress, the people obviously that I come across, that I see, are the homeless. So yeah, it's people who are actually who don't have accommodation. And I know everybody supposedly did have accommodation through this, because the government housed everybody. I don't know that they actually did, because there were still quite a few people who were on the streets of Sheffield that we found that needed help. But I think, one of the biggest stresses, I think, but it was for all of us as well, is the sort of not knowing what's going to happen and where they're going to be. Because even if you, like in the homeless community, even if you're in that community and it's not like our normal, if you like, that is their normal, and they have their own community, they have their own way, they have their own system, their own way of doing things. They know where they can get breakfast at a certain time. They know where it's good to beg. They know where people will bring them a coffee. They know, they often see regular people, and it's that not knowing what's going to happen and not being able to get into their usual places. They could come to us for breakfast, but they couldn't actually come into the building. We were giving it takeaway. and they had to leave. They couldn't hang around, and it was that there was a lot of anger going on, and I think that was one of the main stresses, was the fact that it's all so different, and they couldn't quite understand, like all of us really struggling to understand how this is going to work, how it's, what's going to happen here.
But I think there, Peta, though, and we've talked about privilege quite a lot throughout this, but again, it's a privilege of being mentally stable. That is a privilege as well. And,
okay.
If you are in a position where you can rationalise this and say, all right, do you know what, I know this is on for a short period of time, I can understand what's going on, I can rationalise it, then you can come to terms with it. But for people who are on the streets, as we said, that, mental health issues are rife, and the basic not being able to understand why. That must be hard for people, mustn't it?
And then that just makes people really quite angry. Because they don't understand why. Well, I could do it last week, why can't I do it this week? Or, you did it for me last time, why can't you do it for me this time? Why can't I come in now? Why can't, and there's a lot of anger about, an awful lot of anger about, and emotions running very, very high. And I think, it sort of kicks off quite a bit because of that, and then there's alcohol involved, and there's drugs involved, and all the rest of it with, these sort of, because unfortunately that's the only way you can probably survive, to be fair.
Brilliant, thank you, Peta. So Samara, I know you did a Facebook Live, was it last week or the week before, when we were talking about the increase in period poverty over this period, excuse the pun. But again, these are the unforeseen things that we don't necessarily think about. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so one of the main aims of the Rosendale Red Bag project is to try and get free access to menstrual items, exactly where they're needed and when they're needed. And we are a successful community group, community project, but that's down to the amount of donations that we get. And what happened at the beginning of lockdown on the 23rd of March, if I've got that right, literally within that broadcast that was done on that evening, we lost 27 donation points because they were all in places, in buildings, hairdressers, places of worship, gyms, things like that. So in fact, all of our donation points went down all on one day. And that will be the same with a lot of food banks and a lot of other charities and similar groups all over the country. Bloody Good Period are a big charity in this area, and they released statistics that said they've been having to get out 5 times as many menstrual items as what they were doing prior to lockdown. Now, we were really lucky that was one area that we had quite a lot of stock in. So we have managed to get them out where they've needed, but we will never, ever have enough because it happens once a month, it happens on a regular basis, and more people need them today than who needed them 3.5 months ago. People getting free access in schools. The schools were shut for most pupils for a long period of time, so that's a cohort of people that weren't able to access them. People have been on furlough, so they had their wages drastically reduced. As we mentioned before, there's people who may have been made redundant, or they have no recourse to any support through the government because they're self-employed. So it is just really pinched at the purse and the wallet, and it is become a bigger issue than it was before.
I think one of the things that you said that was really interesting that I hadn't thought about was that, actually, well, you had the red box was a collection point. Girls would just go and get sanitary products as and when they needed them. But a lot of the time they were taking them home as well for their mums and their sisters, which was absolutely fine. That was allowed within the scheme. But the problem now, obviously, they're not getting it. So it's not just teenagers aren't able to access at school. We've got whole households now that aren't able to get it because they haven't got the money, and it's a luxury item supposedly. If it's a choice between eating or having a tampon, you feed your family, don't you? So I think that's, again, it's those unseen issues that arise in the community, isn't it?
Yeah, and the other areas that people haven't possibly thought about is there's people that are at home that are going to be in abusive relationships, and it might be that the women in those households haven't been able to leave the house for a long time, and the partners have been doing the shopping, and it's been a control issue where they've not provided these items. And also as well, I've been involved in delivering some of the shielded boxes. Now, these are boxes that went out to people every single week that were on the shielding list. I never saw a menstrual pad or a tampon or anything in any of those for the however many weeks that they were going out. Now, you're not telling me that the people in the shielding list don't menstruate.
No. But exactly, it's that thing of, it's just not been thought through, has it? That these are, and again, just the mentality of that they're seen as a luxury item, and then there's still that shame. Some of us are quite able to talk about periods without feeling any shame, but there are a lot of women out there who still feel that it's not something that you openly talk about. You can't go and ask somebody for it, and I get that in a way as well. I suppose it's shameful enough to have to ask somebody for food, let alone to have to go and ask somebody for some tampons. So
yeah, there's still such a stigma around it. We have to think about cultural considerations as well, and there's a generational thing there as well, isn't there? I do like to think that we're having more open conversations. I get told that the schools are doing the work from a younger age with everybody in the class. They're not just separating the girls. So I think things will change, but it's not going to change quick enough, and it's not changing now.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned there about domestic abuse as well. We work a lot with the seroptimists. Every single week I try and get the seroptimists in these sessions. But one of the things that we did, and we worked with you on this, Samara, was we tried to raise money for toiletries for the women's refuges, because instantly, the minute we all went into lockdown, there was an immediate pressure on the refuges to house women, to get women out of situations, or even if it's just supporting them whilst they're still in the home. And the politicians and the press and everybody was saying, there'll be a delay, in a few weeks we'll start to see. But it was instant. It was the minute we went into lockdown that they needed those basic things. That with the Serox, we normally provide like slightly more luxurious items, like a nice face wash as opposed to just bar of soap. But the refuge was just saying, look, we just need the absolute basics, because it's crisis point. And you just see it across every type of charity and organisation that the pressures on them have just become so much more.
Yeah, it feels like a million years ago since we did that, a bit of a fundraiser, doesn't it? But it must have been about 12 weeks ago, and what a lot has changed. But I think there's a couple of things around the refuges. If people are escaping violence, they are not going to be thinking, I'm going to leave my husband, let me go and get my tampons. That is not going to be on the mind. So they're just going to go, aren't they? And I think the other thing as well that's really important for me, and you just touched on it there, it's nice to provide the nice things. I think when people are in tricky situations and awful predicaments, to have some dignity of choice and have the option to choose, and not be left with rags or toilet roll, which happens in some cases, or the really cheap stuff, cheap and nasty ones. I think it's really important. And again, it's touching on the self-esteem and mental health side of things as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, we talked about this last week, but that element of choice, of being able, because this is what Joanne, who does the shopping for her elderly people in the community, she was saying, they put on their list bread, and she will ring them up and say, well, what type of bread? What type of tea bags do you like? It's just such a basic as you say, self-esteem thing, isn't it, to be able to have that freedom of choice. But thank you for that, Samara. Claire, I want to come on to you now. What are the extra pressures that have been put on from your service users?
Well, I've mentioned the younger people that we're particularly concerned about, but another group that I think can be forgotten about is anyone that's living with someone with an addiction. So whether it's, alcohol or drugs, whatever it is, part of what we do in our service is support the families, because, if the service user goes to treatment, they get all that support there. If they're not in treatment and they're choosing to carry on using, quite often the families are left wondering, how do we help them without enabling them? What can we do to keep ourselves safe? So we do a lot of the support for families and give them advice and guidance and let them know about, treatment options. And a lot of people will tell us things like, if I could get the money and send them to rehab, I would, and things like that. So anyway, it's a really, really important bit of the service. And what we're finding is we run support groups so that they can, come out of the situation, get out of the house, get off the chest, whatever is happening, share their experiences. And now that they're sort of stuck with someone in the home and they're not able to get out, we are doing some Zoom sessions for them, but you can't really speak, if you're in a house and you think, well, I can't really talk about my child who's using when they're next door, it's kind of like really isolating. So imagine that group in particular, so anyone that's living with addiction within the family and isn't able to really engage in support around that they otherwise would have done. And also, of course, lockdown brings all its other complexities around it. Obviously drug and alcohol services, whilst are still operating and needle exchanges are still operating and things like that, a lot of the services have moved to remote. And yeah, it's just everything's a bit more complex. So we've got a specific drug and alcohol advisor at our service, drug and alcohol carers advisor, and he's working hard to make sure that group of people are still feeling supported. So it's a family of families that are dealing with alcohol or drug issues within it.
There was I don't know if anyone's ever listened to it. There was a podcast. I love podcasts. There was a podcast on the BBC. I think it's finished now, but it was about two girls. One was a teacher and one was a nurse, and they were recovering addicts. And they used to talk about their addiction. I can't remember what it was called now. But that was really good. And one of the things that they were talking about one week was the family dynamic, and the fact that obviously your family are so invested in wanting you to get better, but they've never been an addict, and they don't. They're just like, well, why don't you give it up? Why? And then they get mad. You haven't given it up, or you've had a relapse or whatever. And they were saying, whilst your family is a crucial part of your recovery network, you need those professionals. And again, it's back to that point of if you can't get out of the house, you can't talk to those professionals, and you're stuck with your family, as well-meaning as they might be, they could really get somebody's recovery back, couldn't they?
And it's like on the flip side, for a lot of people in the recovery community, they're keeping well because of the supports that they've found through their own networks, and it could be through groups at the community drug teams, or it could be like by NA or AA, any of the fellowship meetings, and they have their cohort of support. And so you've got a vulnerable set of people that maybe their recovery supports can't be accessed as easily, and in turn that can knock on with the families. I suppose like it's like you say, a lot of families when they're talking to us about things like rehab and detox, they think, well, it's a detox, why do they need rehab? They've got the drugs out of the system, they've got the alcohol out of the system, so what's the problem? And it's like, no, recovery is a journey, and it's a long process, and anything that can tip including this situation, it makes people massively vulnerable, and it's a whole family dynamic. It's not just
I think as well, I've had friends who have been through rehab, and the reason that they have an addiction in the first place, there is a reason that they have an addiction in the first place, because drugs or alcohol were their coping mechanism for something that was wrong. And so taking away the drugs and alcohol, putting them through rehab and taking that out of the system doesn't solve the problem. In a way, you're dealing with the symptoms, and what you've then got to deal with is that underlying reason as to, well, what was the issue that you were trying to use drugs and alcohol to deal with? And if that bit isn't solved, and that, if you like, the getting them off the drugs and alcohol is the easy bit. It's the months and years that follow of rebuilding that person back up. That's the hard bit. And if you take that support service and that support network away at that point, you bring somebody off the drugs, but then, whoa, we're in lockdown, we can't access anything. You're not giving them any alternative means of getting through every day, are you? So naturally, you can go back to using, and then you end up where at Peta's end of the spectrum with her charity, where you're not you personally, Peta, but with your charity, where you're on the streets, because that's where that system has fallen down. But thank you for that. I just want to mention. So Ollie's watching. Hi, Ollie. Ollie runs an amazing community organisation where it's like a forest school. So he takes kids out of the classroom and teaches them to run wild and do children things like climbing trees and building fires and stuff, and it's really, really good. And I know he's just opening up over the summer holidays to be able to offer some of his classes. But Ollie made a really good point, actually, is saying that he used to be a high school science teacher, and back to the issue of period poverty, it was just not normal that you could have conversations with kids, particularly, if you were a male teacher talking to teenage girls about it. And he's made the point that these conversations should become normal, and they absolutely should. And I know that's something you're fighting for, Samara, isn't it?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, I saw Ollie's comment pop up. I've been really lucky enough to do a piece of work with Ollie, with his scouts. Before we managed to get government to commit to providing free menstrual items in schools, we went round to quite a few different organisations and asked people to write to the local MP to talk to them about why these products are really needed. And his scouts were incredible. They all wrote to the MP, they signed the petition, and they did a really lovely piece of work and gave us a huge donation. So thank you very much, Ollie and the scouts.
I mean, this is the thing that should be normal. My 10-year-old, I talk to him freely about my menstrual. I know Samara knows about my amazing knickers, but I've recently learned period knickers, which if you haven't tried them, they're amazing. But Leon knows all about it. He was telling his friend about it. Something. I can't remember what was happening. Some conversation was happening about tampons. He's like, well, my mum doesn't use those anymore. She's got a period knickers now. They should be perfectly normal conversations that boys and girls are able to have, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting off subject. So we've talked about the pressures that charities are facing from the service user end, but I just want to talk about the pressures that charities have been under, well, any community organisation, in actually delivering these services, because obviously of lockdown restrictions and social distancing and stuff. So Peter, I'm going to come to you again now. How has your charity or organisation been able to cope with that? What have they been doing in terms of social distancing and stuff?
Well, for us, actually working there, obviously we're down on numbers. They had to furlough most of their staff, so they were restricted on staff. But then they do have premises because they operate from behind the cathedral in Sheffield. So they've got a shower, they've got a couple of showers, they've got kitchen. All sorts of facilities down there for people. But obviously we started off the first couple of weeks letting people in, trying to keep them distanced, trying to keep that 2 meters apart, so many at a time. They could sit down for breakfast and they were at their own table, and they were, we separated them. We've got a big hall so we could separate them and all this sort of thing. But it was just so very difficult because immediately when they've eaten, they would immediately get up and go and talk to their friend who's sitting at the next table, and we'd say, no, can you just come and sit? Oh, but why? And they just didn't seem to. Most of them, yes, did understand, but it didn't. It went in one ear and out the other, and it just didn't seem to. It was almost like it didn't apply.
Yeah.
So it's been really difficult. We ended up having to actually just close the whole centre down and do just takeaway. So none of our customers can actually come in now. They can come in if they need to go to the loo. Some of them can come in for a shower if they need a shower. They can come in if they need to use the phone, if they need to phone the social security or social services or whatever. They can come in and do that. But generally speaking, it's a takeaway service. So we do a takeaway breakfast and then we do a takeaway lunch. And we're basically trying to encourage people not to hang around. The idea is that people don't hang around and they don't. I mean, we used to have lots of clothes and donations and things like that, which as Tamara said, a lot of that has stopped because people aren't bringing clothes down. But the food donations that we're getting is immense. We've got loads because all the other organisations in the city aren't open yet. So we're getting all their donations. So that first week was amazing. We had God knows how much food coming in from all these different cafes and restaurants because they were closing. There was so much coming in. But we also had a fire as well about 6 weeks ago. We had this massive fire in the building as well. So that means half the building is no longer in use. It's actually being gutted. Yeah, that was really quite distressing, because it was an attack. It was an arson attack as well.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so that was really. But this, you see, to me, that just shows where a lot of the problems lie, because it was someone who had actually used the centre, someone who had used the centre a lot. So it's biting the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, sort of where the problem is. This is the problem. It's you know, it's in the head. It's not just something that you can just give breakfast to and go away. That's fine. Give them some money, go away. Give them accommodation, they'll be fine. No, it's not about that. It's what's going on in here. It's about education. It's about helping people on their own terms, not just in the way we see the world, you know, because people see the world. So, I mean, so yeah, back to your question. Yeah, we're just out. We're just we're sort of skeleton, really. We're doing skeleton stuff. So it's there's just a few of us in at a time, and we try to keep distance. And you know, we hand out breakfasts.
Have you found, in terms of people like volunteers to help and stuff, did you find that you've had a steady stream of people wanting to help, or did you find that there was quite a surge at the beginning of people wanting to help, and that sort of trickled down, or not at all?
Well, quite a lot of people couldn't. The volunteers that they already had, I believe, a lot of them couldn't, because there was a certain amount of students who had to go back home. There were students who had to then work from home, and you know, because everything changed. And then, of course, some of the volunteers were self-isolating because they had perhaps underlying issues, and they didn't want to go out, and they didn't want to you know, mix or anything. So we lost a certain amount of volunteers. But now, however many months it is, 3 or 4 months on, we're actually getting volunteers back. People are actually coming back and saying, oh yes, we actually, you know, when can we come back? You know, tell us when we can come back. But the problem is, we don't, it's a very difficult place to social distance. So you can only have so many people in the building at any one time. So, you know, it's that balance, isn't it, of you want all the volunteers there to help, but then not allowed to stand next to each other. So
and this is, I mean, you're not unique in this. This is the problem. A lot of business, well, every single business is now. No, you know, here in Bacup where I live, there's quite a few cafes and little quirky shops, because the Bacup is a very, very old mill town, and the buildings are very, very small. So you can have 2 or 3 people in them at once, and if you've got your staff in, you can fit maybe 1 or 2 customers through the door, and that's it. And this is then you have this problem of, is it even cost effective to open the door, or you know, it's because it's pay the staff and get the building open and keep the lights on, but more than we can actually make in terms of people through. And these are the real challenges now that I'm sure, you know, if I was still watching, that would be, as I said, he's opening up his summer school for wild traffic. Can he get enough children in, and then again, how to keep children socially distant in order to make that pay in terms of running the business? So yeah, they're very, very real challenges that are not going anywhere. So what are you, in terms of, you know, because you've got your finger in quite a few pies, what are the challenges that your organisations have been facing?
Well, I think the main one, as I mentioned before, was that our donation points closed down. So we've actually quite creative in how we try and get our donations. We started off an Amazon wish list, which is possibly not the most ethical way of getting products to and from places, but it has been a bit of a lifesaver over these past couple of months. So people from all over the country, not just Rosendale, have been able to donate, click Amazon Prime, and the stuff turns up on my doorstep, and then I've been able to go and deliver it to where it needs to go. So it has been about being creative. We've not been able to get the products out in the way that we used to. So we've been giving them to places like Rosendale Connected, which was the hub that was set up in response to COVID-19. We took a load of our donations to them and they took them out with them. We've supported other places like Positive Start, which is a food group, and they've taken the products out. So it's just been about putting little tweaks in just to try and minimise contact with people and also utilise the services that are already there.
I think that's been one of the really heartening things that I've seen, and obviously I can only speak for Rosendale. I don't know what other areas have been like, but within a few days of lockdown happening, the Rosendale Connected website had been set up. All of the community organisation, like I say, I'm the chair of the Baker Business Association. We were instantly invited to attend panels and meetings, and there was a huge effort to pull all of these services together and say, right, what can you do? Where have you got a gap? Right, somebody else can do that. Right, let's connect everybody up. And I think that's been a really, really heartening fact of this, is the way that community groups and organisations have pulled together in this way. Have you seen it from your side like that, Samara?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hats off to Ken Massa, who is the chap in Rosendale who pulled it all together. He's the CEO of the Rosendale Leisure Trust, and he has been absolutely amazing at spearheading the Rosendale Connected and bringing people together. The first meeting we had about 10 people from 10 different agencies there, and the last one that I was at had 40 something. So that just shows how it grew over the 3 months. But the other thing as well that I think is really important to mention is the little bits of community work that were going on that weren't linked or aren't linked to community groups. So I know of a couple of people that were making the bags for scrubs for people to put their uniforms in. A couple of women, in fact, quite a few women in Rosendale were making those. I delivered nearly 400 of those, and that's just me delivering those. So goodness knows how many Barbara made. People have been making masks. We've had people, another one of my friends was baking pies for people every Friday. It was Friday Pie Day in Rosendale, and they were going out to the community there. So, it's fantastic what the established groups were doing, but I think it's so important to see what individuals were doing. People really, really raised the bar, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It has been heartening to see them kind of come through the adversity that they've been challenged. Claire, how's your community, your charity, your organisation responded? What challenges have you faced?
Well, a massive challenge from the outset is that when someone's referred to the service, we like to sit down and have a face-to-face chat with them to basically find out, who is it you're supporting, what is their illness or, disability, addiction, whatever, how does it manifest, and what is it we can help you with. So we ask about, how you feel about your caring role, your own finances, how have you got everything you need in the home, that sort of thing. And so you can build a rapport. You're asking some quite personal questions very quickly. And it's a really big thing to build rapport with someone. And we always found face-to-face always worked better than telephone. And straight away, we've had to stop home visits and switch to that phone support. And if you can imagine, a lot of carers, they're actually living in the same home as the person that they care for. And it would be very, very hard to be candid about someone that might be next door or, somewhere else in the house, but you're scared of being overheard. So I think working remotely has its challenges in terms of that. But really, we've been really lucky in that we've been able to do pretty much everything that we have always done. We've just had to do it really differently. And whether it's being creative about finding a time when, maybe the person that has the illness goes to bed early, and maybe then you can take yourself off into another house and we'll do your assessment later on in the evening, things like that. But that's been the main thing, because I think unless you've got that rapport and you've built the trust, someone's not going to be really upfront about what it is the thing, especially because we do get people and they don't want to be in a caring position. It's actually the thing that they want to do. And to have you know, the person that you're supporting hear that, you know, it can be detrimental. Obviously, you've got to look after that. So yeah, that's been a really big challenge, but we're finding ways of overcoming it and just trying to be creative. And I know some community groups are starting to do the face-to-faces again, but they're doing things like, should we go for a walk in the park? We'll keep our distance, we'll keep away from people, but we can still sort of communicate. And so we're starting to think about things like that, and you know, obviously keeping staff safe. But it's being able to talk honestly, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's difficult to find the space to allow people to do that over the phone.
It's such a crucial part of all you know, human interaction, isn't it? But I know, you know, we were carers for my nan for the last year of her life, and she had so we had support from various organisations, but she had Age Concern went in and spent an hour with her a day. She had the chiropodist, she had the hairdresser, and because we were still working, we were still out of work during the day, so you know, from 9 to 5 she was on her own, and that is such a crucial part of the support network, both for the person who is the caree and the person who is the carer, because that, you know, if they're not working, might be the only hour of the week where they get to go out the house and have a bit of time for themselves. And like you say, that face-to-face of getting out, getting away from the person, talking to somebody else, having a human conversation, it's so crucial, isn't it? And if you think going into a lockdown situation where you're suddenly with that person 24 hours a day for 3 or 6 months on end, it's tough. It's really bloody tough, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, my mum's passed away now, but my mum had dementia, and she used to go and get her hair done every Saturday, and it was an hour out for my dad, who was living with the repetition of dementia, you know, hour after hour. It's constant. And so that hour a week for my dad was massive for his well-being. So I'm thinking, you know, if we're in that situation now and she wasn't able to leave the house, and it's like you were saying, you become everything. You'd have to be the chiropodist, the hairdresser, the nurse, you know, a lot of routine medical appointments were cancelled, weren't they? And it's just that feeling of being stuck as well, and not having your own breathing space. Yeah,
and Zoom calls are great. You know, they help you keep in touch with people, but it's not the same as getting out and having a chat with somebody, is it? It's just not. I'm conscious that we are coming up to time, so we've just got 5-10 minutes left. There are a couple of questions that I ask at every one of these sessions, and one of them is about resources that people can go to. So if somebody at the moment is either really struggling because they are in need of something and they're not able to get it, or if they are somebody who wants to go and help the community, maybe they're coming out of shielding, but they're still furloughed or whatever, where can people go? So Peter, I'll come to you again first. Where have you found any good books, resources, apps, websites, courses, anything that can help anyone?
Well, the place where I volunteer is that's probably one of the oldest places in Sheffield where you can actually help out, and they have a lot of information about various other organisations going on. So I mean, I'm sort of concentrating on homeless people at the moment, so that's the Cathedral Arch Project. So they have a website, so you can find out all sorts of information on there, and then they're affiliated to all sorts of other associations that help homeless people. I would recommend just going to the Cathedral Arch Project and finding out what they need, because at the moment it's all up in the air. Like you say, we don't know what we're doing yet. We don't know when we're going to be back to normal, but they can certainly put you in touch with other organisations that need help. And basically, I mean, even if you don't want to, you haven't got time to volunteer or anything, it's the donations that we need now. We do need more stuff coming in. We need money, we need clothes, and we need toiletries and towels and sleeping bags and things like that. So,
it is a very good point. People think that in order to help they've got to give them their time and start volunteering, and actually, it's not necessarily that. It's just have a look through your cupboards and see what you've got. If you've got
absolutely
resources and stuff. But yeah, I will ask all of you at the end of this session to put those contact details in the comment section of the chat. So thanks for that, Peter. So Samara, what about you? Where would you send people? Any resources?
Yeah, what I'd probably say is we've got Rosendale connected here, but every single local authority was tasked with setting up with some sort of hub. So wherever you live, if you Google COVID hub in your town or your city, that it should point you in the direction of the local neighbourhood hub. And from there, if you can't help them directly, they will know the services that need volunteers or need help and how to help them. They're an excellent place for signposting, and it may be that you can help them directly. And the other thing as well that I've noticed is that there's hundreds and hundreds of mutual aid groups that have been set up as well in response to this. So if you went on your Facebook and just typed in COVID-19 mutual aid, that has got a list of every single mutual aid group in the whole country, and some of those are run through the hubs and some of them are just Facebook groups where communities are helping communities.
I think it's a really good point, isn't it? Because quite often in these situations, and you see it with massive natural disasters as well, you know, like earthquakes and stuff, everybody's is like, I want to help, I want to do something, and they set up a Facebook group or they set up a charity or they do whatever, and you know, that's admirable, but 9 times out of 10 there is already a charity or a Facebook group or something that is providing that service, and they, you know, you would be much better off joining forces and doing that. So I think, you know, if you want to help the community, as Samara says, go to the hub first and find out what's going on. If there genuinely isn't anything, then absolutely set it up and meet that need. But if somebody's already doing it, join forces. Yeah.
And also just see, you know, just going knocking on people's doors. We are safe to do that now. But if there's somebody on your street that you know lives alone and there is a way of communicating with them, go and ask them how, you know, they don't have to be grand gestures. It could just be knocking on someone's door and asking how they are and what they need.
Yeah, do you know what? It's International Loneliness Day tomorrow, International Anti-Loneliness Day. I can't remember which one it is. And that is the whole thrust of that campaign is basically, if you think somebody might be lonely, just ask them how they are, ring them up, invite them for a cup of tea, you know, buy them a bunch of flowers, whatever it is, because those little gestures of just, you know, you just helping your next door neighbour have a slightly better day is just as worthy a task as helping 50 homeless people and make them breakfast, isn't it? So yeah, I think use tomorrow as a good opportunity to just see, is anyone lonely near you, and try and make them a little less lonely. Ollie's just put a really good comment actually. He said there's an app called Hub of Hope, and if you put your location in, it'll tell you what support groups are around you. So that's a really good tip, Holly. Thank you for that. Claire, I'm going to come to you next. Where would you send people, or what would your advice be to people?
There's a really good website that it's actually been led by Lancashire Constabulary, and it's called Our Lancashire. And it was set up, I think, in late 2019, just to be a one-stop resource for every service that's across Lancashire, what's happening, any support groups, you know, craft groups, anything like that. So if anyone needed anything, basically Lancashire, it's got all the services, whether it's a charity, whether it's just a few people getting together, it's a really good resource. And then obviously with the COVID situation, they've kind of done some COVID specific supports there too. So again, tapping into things like the food, distributing food to people, activity packs, any kind of befriending side that people need. So I always think that's a really good for anyone in Lancashire, any service, whatever you need. To me, that's.
I've heard of that. Is that the one that was set up? The police chief, the police and crime commissioner came to talk to us in Wake-up last year. Is that the one that they set up? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's led by a guy called Richard Roberts, who's great, and he'll advertise anything that, you know, basically any services we'll give him. It's a really good resource, and it's growing. Yeah. It's getting really good, yeah.
I think that, there are also, as I've already said, but there are hubs already. If you haven't got a hub, if you Google it, you'll find it. But if there isn't a hub near you, your local council will be able to help, or just having a chat with things like your local business association. There's also a website called Lancashire, which is where businesses can get together and share information. But there's a lot of charities on there promoting their events and things that they've got on. So that's a really good place to go. But yeah, as I've already said, there's probably somebody out there doing something. So identify who they are, and failing all else, go on Facebook and just search for local groups and start having conversations with people and say, where can I help? And if it's not a means of your time, you can bedding, clothing, toiletries, food and drink, anything like that you've got that you don't need at the moment that could help somebody. Don't just chuck things out at the moment. People need all the help they can get. Okay, we're coming up to time, ladies, so thank you so much for your time. I just want to go around quickly and do your one top tip. So if I was to ask you for one top tip, either to charities or to people needing them, what would it be? Peter, I'm going to come to you again first.
Oh, crikey, a top tip.
Yeah.
To help charities is just think about it. Think about someone other than yourself. Because that was my problem. I was just so full of myself. I need to think about other people. So yeah, put yourself in their shoes. Think about how it might be for them.
Do you know what, though, Peter? It's such a basic thing to say, but it's so rewarding mentally, because not in that altruistic, I've helped someone else, I feel so much better, but just in the way of putting your life into the perspective of somebody else's life helps massively. And I've put this into the perspective of the grand scheme, and maybe my problems aren't that bad, or they're not heavy on my head. That just helps massively. So I think
it has been shown to reduce stress. The more you help somebody else, because I'm big on stress relief, and it has been actually proven that the more you do for your community, the more you help other people, it's a huge stress relief. It actually releases oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and all that. That's a whole nother session.
It's good for you. No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Samara, what about you, please?
I think you probably touched on them. I think one of the main things I'd say, it doesn't have to be grand gestures. It could be something really small. So as we talked about, asking a friend or neighbour or someone if they needs a little bit of help, even donating one tin of soup or one, it's better than nothing. And as Peter said, it will make you feel great. And also making use of what services are already available. It's not about reinventing the wheel. Can you go and help something that's already going on? And sometimes it's just about putting yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Yeah. And there are, we haven't mentioned this yet, but there are collection points still at most supermarkets. I know Tesco do it, don't they, for food, for food banks and stuff. So absolutely, as you say, just buy an extra tin of beans and donate it. I know that's Tesco's slogan, isn't it? But genuinely every So yeah, good top tip. Thank you, Samara. So Claire, what would your top tip be?
Well, I think one of the things that occurs to me is that, we know that people financially have been really hit hard, and probably the same expectations on fundraising aren't going to be there going forward. But one of the ways you can support charities is actually by registering with them. And we always say to people, if you are caring for someone, even if you think you don't need any help, please register with us. Because by you're helping us by boosting our numbers. We have targets of people that we need to get on our register, but also it does mean that if it hits the fan and crisis happens and all of a sudden you need services, then we're in place, then we're good to go with it straight away. So even if you don't think you need help, register with any services that are appropriate to you or relevant, because you're helping them out. You might not be able to give them financial donations, but you're helping them get the numbers up. And we still we can't do our outreach activities the way we could, and we still need people to be registering with us every month. So consider anyone that you can support that way too.
Yeah, it is, because you think like, I'm going to be a burden on but actually you're not. By just registering and being there, you're helping that charity, because they can say, look, we have 25,000 people that need this service, you have to fund us. So yeah, it does help. So my top tip would be, and this was one of the things I thought, there's so much more in this that we could have talked about, we never got around to, but there is no shame at all in asking for help. So many people at the moment are struggling, and as we said at the beginning, and we didn't have a chance to discuss it any deeper, but you don't have to be poor to need a food bank. You don't have to be deficient in some way to need a service to help you. Everybody at the moment is facing a really, really stressful time from all different directions, and that, as this recession hardens, is only going to get worse. So if you need assistance, even if you just need a bit of food, or you need some sanitary products, or whatever it is, never, ever, ever be ashamed to ask for it, because we have to pull together as a community if we're all going to get through this. So that's it. Thank you. We've gone 1 minute over time. As I've already said, we could have talked about this for ages more. But thank you so much to all four of you for joining me. We have Peta, we have Claire, and we have Samara. It's been a really good session. The sun's actually come out, so I might we might have a fun weekend. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.